It was just another regular afternoon in the quiet suburban neighborhood where Alex lived. The sun was beginning to dip low in the sky, casting a warm golden light over everything. The air was fresh with a slight breeze that rustled the leaves of the trees. Alex, a 16-year-old teen, had just finished his homework earlier that day and decided to ride his bike to the nearby convenience store to pick up a snack. His mind was not on anything too serious, just enjoying the simplicity of the ride. It was a peaceful moment. One of those afternoons when the world seemed to slow down. Alex's bike was nothing fancy, just an old mountain bike with a few scratches from the many rides he had taken over the years. He wasn't worried about anything, just lost in the rhythm of pedaling as he cruised down the quiet street. His neighborhood was usually a safe, friendly place where everyone knew each other, and there was hardly ever any trouble. It was the kind of place where people waved to each other as they passed, and kids rode their bikes without fear. But on this particular afternoon, things were about to change in a way Alex never expected. As he pedaled toward the convenience store, he noticed a group of motorcycles parked near the corner of the street. They were loud, powerful machines with shiny chrome and roaring engines that could be heard even from a distance. Alex didn't think much of it at first. Motorcycles weren't unusual in his neighborhood, but this group was different. There were at least 5 of them, and they looked like they didn't belong in the quiet neighborhood at all. The bikers were talking and laughing loudly. From the way they dressed and acted, Alex could tell they weren't the kind of people who would just pass through quietly. They were big, burly men with tattoos all over their arms, leather jackets and bandanas covering their heads. Their faces looked rough, hardened by years of living on the edge. They looked like they could cause trouble, but Alex wasn't too concerned. He'd seen bikers around before, and they usually minded their own business. But as he passed them on his bike, something strange happened. One of the bikers, the biggest one with a scar running down his cheek, locked eyes with Alex. He stared at the teen for a moment, his gaze cold and calculating. Alex felt a chill run down his spine but kept pedaling, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling in his stomach. The big biker wasn't satisfied with just a look, though. He waved his hand toward Alex and shouted, "Hey, kid! Stop for a second." Alex hesitated. He could feel his heart racing a little faster. He wasn't sure why, but something about the situation didn't feel right. He thought about just ignoring the biker and continuing on his way. But the man's voice was commanding, and there was something in his tone that made Alex slow down. He stopped his bike just a few feet away from the group, trying to appear calm, though inside he was starting to feel nervous. "Yeah, you. The kid on the bike," the biker said again, a grin spreading across his face. "You got something we want." Alex's mind raced. He didn't have much with him, just a small bag with his wallet and a candy bar he'd picked up at the store. He wasn't sure what the biker meant, but something told him this wasn't going to be a friendly conversation. The big biker took a few steps forward, his friends following suit, their eyes now focused on Alex. "That's a nice bike you've got there," he said, his grin turning into a smirk. "How about you hand it over to us? We'll take it off your hands." Alex's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. It was one thing for people to mess with you in the movies, but this was real life. The bikers were asking him to give up his bike, and they didn't seem like they were joking. He quickly glanced around, but there was no one else nearby. It was just him and these intimidating men. Alex felt a wave of panic wash over him, but he did his best to keep it under control. He wasn't going to let them take what was his without a fight. "I'm not giving you my bike," Alex said, his voice shaking slightly, but he was trying to sound confident. The big biker raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Oh, you're gonna refuse?" he said, stepping even closer. "You don't get to make the rules here, kid. This is our street now." Alex clenched his fists, his mind racing for a way out of the situation. He knew he had to stay calm and think fast. He could feel the tension building in the air. The bikers weren't backing off, and they were clearly getting angrier by the second. "Hand it over, or we'll take it," the biker growled, his smile fading, replaced by a look of serious threat. Alex's stomach turned. He didn't want to fight, but he also didn't want to let these men push him around. The situation was quickly spiraling out of control, and Alex realized that he wasn't just dealing with some random people on the street. These bikers weren't interested in being reasonable. They were after what they wanted, and they weren't afraid to take it by force. The peaceful afternoon that had begun with nothing more than a ride to the store had quickly turned into something much more dangerous. Alex's life was about to change in a way he couldn't have predicted. He wasn't just a teenager out for a snack anymore. He was about to face a test of courage and strength against people who didn't care about anything but getting what they wanted. Little did he know, this encounter would force him to rely on more than just his quick thinking. It would push him to tap into skills he never thought he'd need. Skills that would soon make the bikers regret ever crossing his path. The quiet afternoon had turned into a nightmare, and Alex's life was about to take a sharp, unexpected turn. The bikers' laughter echoed in the quiet street as Alex stood there, frozen for a brief moment, unsure of how to react. It was as if the world around him had slowed down, every sound seeming muffled except the heavy thump of his own heartbeat. The biker with the scar on his cheek was stepping closer, his eyes narrowing, studying Alex with an expression that was anything but friendly. It wasn't just a casual request, it was an order, a demand. "Yeah, you heard me, kid. Hand it over," the biker said, his voice rough and commanding. He pointed at Alex's bike, his finger shaking slightly as he gestured toward it. "You don't want to get hurt over a stupid bike, do you?" Alex's mind raced. He had never been in a situation like this before. Sure, there had been bullies at school, but this felt entirely different. These were grown men and they were serious. He could feel the weight of their gaze, like each one of them was sizing him up, as if they were already deciding how much trouble he would be if he didn't comply. The first instinct Alex had was to run, to hop on his bike and pedal away as fast as he could. But something stopped him. Something deep inside told him that running would only make things worse. If he ran, they would chase him, and the consequences would be even worse. They were bigger than him, and they clearly weren't the kind of people who would let a kid get away that easily. "Come on, kid," the biker continued, his voice lowering into a menacing growl. "You really think we won't take it from you? You're just a little teen. We can do whatever we want." The words hung in the air, thick with threat. Alex didn't flinch, even though every part of him wanted to. He knew that backing down wasn't an option anymore. He couldn't just hand over his bike. It wasn't just a piece of metal and rubber. It was his independence, his way of getting around the neighborhood without relying on anyone else. It was one of the few things that was truly his. And yet, as much as Alex wanted to stand his ground, he had no idea what to do next. The bikers had surrounded him now and he was starting to feel trapped. He looked for an escape, but the street ahead was clear and there was no one in sight to help him. He was alone with these men, and the situation was spiraling fast. The leader of the group, the scarred biker, took another step closer, this time standing right in front of Alex. His breath smelled like cigarette smoke, and Alex could feel the heat radiating off his body. The biker leaned in, his face only inches from Alex's, and for a moment Alex felt a wave of fear wash over him. But he quickly pushed it down. He wasn't going to give in to fear. "You don't have a choice here, kid," the leader said, his voice low and threatening. "You're either going to hand it over or things are going to get ugly. What's it going to be?" Alex's pulse quickened and he could feel his palms starting to sweat, but he refused to let the fear take over. In that moment, something inside him clicked, a feeling of defiance, of refusing to let these strangers bully him. He wasn't going to let them push him around. "Not today. Not like this. I'm not giving you anything," Alex finally said, his voice shaking slightly but steady enough to show he meant it. His words hung in the air, defiant. He met the scarred biker's eyes, trying to show that he wasn't intimidated even though every part of him wanted to look away. The biker didn't take kindly to this. He let out a harsh laugh, stepping back and crossing his arms over his chest. "Oh, so you think you can stop us?" he sneered. "You're just a kid and we're not playing around. You're in over your head." One of the other bikers, a tall man with a scruffy beard, snorted. "Let's just take it," he muttered, looking ready to grab Alex and yank him off his bike. His eyes were filled with impatience, like he was getting tired of waiting for the kid to come to his senses. But the scarred leader held up a hand. "No," he said firmly, his eyes still locked on Alex. "Let's see how long this kid will last. I'm curious." As the seconds ticked by, the tension in the air grew thicker. Alex was beginning to understand the biker's mentality. They didn't care about his rights or his belongings, they just saw him as an easy target. To them, he was just another helpless teen, someone they could intimidate without consequence. But Alex wasn't just going to roll over and give them what they wanted. He wasn't going to let them steal his bike or his sense of safety. He knew he had to do something, anything, to regain control of the situation before it spiraled further. His thoughts were interrupted as one of the bikers made a sudden move. The man lunged forward, grabbing Alex by the arm in a rough, forceful grip. Alex winced as his arm was pulled, but in the same moment, he instinctively jerked his body away, trying to break free. The biker was stronger, but Alex's reflexes were quick. He twisted his body just enough to slip free of the biker's grasp. The movement surprised everyone, including the bikers. For a split second, it seemed like the world had paused. The biker stood there, stunned that Alex had managed to escape. The leader's expression shifted slightly, as if he didn't quite know how to react to this unexpected turn of events. Alex was breathing heavily now, his mind racing. He hadn't expected to break free so easily, but he knew the window of opportunity wouldn't last long. He had to think fast. But for the first time since the encounter began, Alex felt a surge of hope, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, he could stand up to them. The bikers were still watching him closely, but now the tension was shifting. They were realizing that this wasn't going to be as easy as they thought. Alex, the teen they had underestimated, was starting to show them that he wasn't someone to be messed with. As the moment of silence hung in the air, Alex stood facing the bikers, his heart pounding in his chest. His body was tense, but his mind was surprisingly clear. The initial shock of the situation had worn off, and now he was thinking, really thinking, about what he needed to do. He couldn't just let them take his bike, not without a fight. The thought of walking away wasn't an option anymore, not when they had made it clear that they had no intention of leaving him alone. The situation had escalated too far, and Alex knew he needed to act fast. He glanced around quickly, his eyes scanning the street for any sign of help. But the street was eerily empty, with not a soul in sight. The quiet neighborhood that had once felt like a safe haven now seemed distant, almost foreign. There was no one to come to his aid, no one to intervene. It was just him and these bikers, and he had to rely on himself. He could feel the sweat on his palms as he gripped the handlebars of his bike tightly, his fingers digging into the rubber. He had been in tough spots before, at school with bullies and arguments with friends, but nothing like this. The bikers were grown men, far stronger than him, and they weren't afraid of using force to get what they wanted. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but one thing was clear. This wasn't going to be an easy confrontation. The leader of the bikers, the scarred man with the rough voice, took a step forward, his boots crunching on the gravel of the road. His eyes were locked on Alex, filled with cold judgment, but also something else, curiosity. It was as if the biker was watching him, waiting to see how long he could keep up the act of defiance. "You really think you can stand up to us, huh?" the leader said, his voice a low growl. "You've got guts, I'll give you that. But guts don't protect you from a bad beating, kid." The other bikers chuckled behind him, their eyes narrowing in amusement. They were used to intimidation working in their favor. No one ever resisted. Everyone always backed down, gave them what they wanted, and moved on. But Alex wasn't like everyone else. He wasn't going to just roll over and play scared. In that instant, something inside Alex clicked. He had spent months learning self-defense techniques from his older brother, who had been a martial artist in his youth. His brother had taught him the basics of combat, how to block, how to escape, how to protect himself. At the time, Alex had thought it was just something to do to stay fit, a way to pass the time. But now in this moment, all those lessons came rushing back to him. The bikers thought he was just some defenseless teenager, someone they could bully into submission. But Alex wasn't helpless. He wasn't just some kid. He had skills that he was now ready to put to use. As the leader stepped closer, Alex's body went into autopilot. His breathing slowed, and he adjusted his stance, making sure he had a solid footing on the ground. He didn't have much time before the bikers tried to grab him again, so he needed to be quick and precise. His mind replayed his brother's lessons, keeping his center of balance low, staying flexible, and reacting swiftly. The leader lunged forward, expecting Alex to flinch or back away. But instead, Alex shifted his weight and sidestepped the biker's attack. In one fluid motion, Alex grabbed the biker's arm and used the momentum to twist it behind his back, forcing him off balance. The biker grunted in surprise, stumbling forward. For a moment, the group stood frozen, staring at Alex in disbelief. They hadn't expected him to fight back, not like this. The leader cursed under his breath, trying to shake free from Alex's grip. But Alex wasn't done. He pushed the biker away, sending him stumbling into one of his friends. The movement was quick, calculated, and it caught the bikers off guard. They weren't used to being outmaneuvered, especially not by a teen. The other bikers quickly reacted, charging forward with the intent to overpower Alex. But Alex wasn't intimidated. He had learned to stay calm in high-pressure situations, to think ahead. As the first biker rushed at him, Alex ducked low, dodging the punch that was aimed at his face. He blocked the biker's follow-up swing with his arm, using the force to push the man off balance. With a swift kick to the stomach, Alex sent him crashing to the ground. The leader roared in frustration, his anger growing as he saw his men being taken down by a kid. "You little brat," he shouted, his voice filled with fury. "You think you can just mess with us and get away with it?" But Alex wasn't backing down. His heart raced, but his mind remained focused. He could hear his brother's voice in his head, reminding him to never underestimate the power of surprise. He wasn't a fighter by nature, but he had the training to defend himself when it mattered most. Another biker charged at Alex, swinging a fist that was aimed at his head. Alex ducked once again, narrowly avoiding the punch. He grabbed the biker's wrist and twisted it, using the biker's own momentum to flip him onto the ground. The biker howled in pain, clutching his arm as he tried to recover, but Alex wasn't giving him a chance. He quickly moved behind him and delivered a sharp strike to the back of the man's head, knocking him out cold. For a moment, everything seemed still. The bikers, who had been so sure of themselves moments ago, were now scattered around him, groaning in pain and confusion. The leader, clearly frustrated, wiped the sweat from his brow, staring at Alex with wide eyes. "You're a hell of a lot tougher than you look, kid," the leader muttered, eyeing him warily. But this isn't over. Alex stood there, catching his breath, his heart still pounding in his chest. He didn't know if the bikers would retreat or if they would attack again, but one thing was certain. He had earned their respect. He wasn't just some scared teen anymore. He had shown them that he wasn't someone to be messed with, and for the first time in his life he felt truly in control of his own fate. The tension in the air was palpable, like a live wire waiting to snap. Alex stood there, his heart pounding in his chest, his body still tingling with the adrenaline from the fight. The bikers, once so sure of themselves, were now scattered around him, each nursing their wounds or trying to get back on their feet. The leader, who had been so certain of his dominance just moments ago, was now staring at Alex with a mixture of disbelief and growing anger. Alex knew he couldn't let his guard down. Even though he had caught them off guard and made a decent start in defending himself, the bikers were still a serious threat. They outnumbered him, and their anger was only escalating. The last thing Alex wanted was to get into an all-out brawl with these men, but he understood that they wouldn't let him go easily now. For a few long seconds, there was nothing but the sound of heavy breathing and shuffling footsteps. The leader of the bikers was glaring at Alex, rubbing his shoulder where Alex had twisted his arm earlier. His eyes were burning with a mix of frustration and a desire to reassert control over the situation. The other bikers were starting to recover, each of them shooting glares in Alex's direction, their pride wounded by the fact that a teenage boy had taken them down with ease. "Enough of this," the leader muttered, his voice low but filled with venom. He straightened up, wiping the sweat from his brow as he stood taller, trying to regain some of the dominance he had lost in those few brief moments. "You want to play tough, huh? We'll show you what happens when you mess with the wrong group." The air seemed to grow even thicker with that statement. The bikers were gathering themselves, their eyes shifting between Alex and one another, silently making a decision. They were angry now, and Alex knew that anger wasn't going to be easy to deal with. He had only moments before they charged again, and this time it was going to be more dangerous than ever. Alex knew he had to act fast. The fight so far had been quick, unexpected, but the bikers weren't fools. They would come at him with everything they had now that they were more prepared. The leader of the group was clearly not one to back down, and his followers had a lot of pride to regain. If Alex didn't do something to de-escalate the situation, this could quickly spiral into something much worse. Without warning, one of the bikers lunged forward, aiming a punch directly at Alex's chest. This time Alex didn't hesitate. He sidestepped the attack just as he had earlier, but this time he quickly grabbed the biker's arm, twisting it behind his back and using the biker's own momentum to push him forward. The man stumbled, but Alex wasn't done. He knew he couldn't afford to let anyone get close enough to overpower him again, so he spun around, landing a quick but sharp kick to the biker's side. The man went down, but Alex didn't have time to celebrate his victory. Before he could fully turn to face the rest of the group, another biker was already rushing at him, swinging a heavy chain. Alex ducked at the last moment, narrowly avoiding the chain as it whistled past his head. The heavy metal hit the ground with a loud thud, and Alex took the opportunity to roll to the side, positioning himself in a way that would give him a better chance to respond. The chain-wielding biker didn't stop. He pulled the chain back, ready to strike again. Alex wasn't going to wait for it to hit him. He had to act quickly. Using the training he had practiced for months, Alex moved forward, closing the distance between them just enough to make it difficult for the biker to swing the chain properly. With a quick step to the side, Alex grabbed the biker's arm that was holding the chain, twisting it until the biker was forced to drop it. The biker let out a startled yelp, but Alex wasn't finished. He used the biker's moment of vulnerability to shove him backward, sending him crashing to the ground. Now, only the leader remained standing. The others were either knocked out or too dazed to get up. The scarred man looked furious, his fists clenched at his sides as he glared at Alex. The leader took a slow step forward, his eyes never leaving Alex's. His lips curled into a wicked smile, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was a grin full of malice, the kind of grin that said he was willing to go to any length to win. "You think you're something special, huh?" the leader sneered, his voice dripping with venom. "You're just a kid. You can't fight all of us. You might have gotten lucky, but this isn't over. You're going to regret messing with me." Alex felt a surge of confidence rise in him, but it was tempered by the harsh reality of the situation. The leader was big, probably bigger than any of the bikers he had fought so far, and if he was this angry, Alex knew it wouldn't be easy. He had to stay sharp. He couldn't afford to make any mistakes now. The leader stepped forward again, but this time Alex stood his ground. He tightened his grip on the handlebars of his bike, using it not just as a tool to escape, but as a way to defend himself. If the leader was going to charge him, Alex needed to be ready. His body was aching from the previous encounters, but his mind was focused. He wasn't about to back down. "Not now. Come on," Alex said, his voice steady despite the tension in his chest. "I'm not backing down. You're going to have to fight harder than that." The leader's grin faded for a moment, and for the first time since the confrontation began, doubt flickered in his eyes. Alex could see it. The leader had expected him to fold, to give up, to back away. But Alex wasn't afraid anymore. He had already fought back and won, and that had given him more confidence than anything. He had proven that he wasn't some helpless kid. They couldn't just bully him into submission. The leader paused, looking around at his fallen comrades. The other bikers were still groaning and struggling to get up, but the leader was no longer sure of himself. He hadn't counted on being outmaneuvered by a teen, especially one with the determination that Alex had shown. His arrogance was slowly turning into frustration, and Alex could feel the shift. The bikers were no longer in control. They were desperate. For the first time, the leader seemed to reconsider. He glanced at his friends, then back at Alex, his shoulders sagging as if he had come to an unwelcome realization. This wasn't the easy target he had thought it would be. Alex, still standing firm, watched him carefully. He knew this wasn't over yet, but something had changed in the dynamic. The bikers weren't just angry anymore, they were uncertain. And for the first time, Alex realized that maybe, just maybe, he was the one in control. The moment of hesitation from the leader of the bikers was brief, but it was enough. The power dynamic that had once been heavily tilted in their favor was shifting, and Alex could feel it. He wasn't just a victim anymore, not some helpless teen caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. He had shown them he could fight back. He had already outsmarted two of them, and now the remaining bikers were hesitating. This was his chance to put an end to this. He could see it in the leader's eyes. The man wasn't sure anymore. That uncertainty was like a crack in the armor of their intimidating front. For a brief second, the leader backed off slightly, taking a step away from Alex, his eyes darting to the other bikers. They were still groaning, recovering from the hits Alex had delivered, but they were struggling to get back up. The confidence they had once displayed seemed to be slipping away, replaced by anger and disbelief. It was as if the group had underestimated Alex from the start, thinking he was just another kid to push around. But they had learned the hard way that he wasn't someone they could intimidate. He wasn't like the other people they had bullied. "Let's finish this," the leader growled, more to himself than to anyone else, His voice was filled with frustration and the look in his eyes was darker now. He was no longer just angry. He was desperate to salvage his pride, and when pride was on the line, people became unpredictable. Alex stood his ground, eyes scanning the bikers as they slowly got to their feet. The leader made a move to close the distance between them, but Alex wasn't going to wait for him to strike. He had been trained to be quick, to think on his feet, and he wasn't about to let this go any further than it had to. The first biker to get to his feet, a large man with a thick beard, rushed at Alex with a snarl, swinging his fist at him. The swing was powerful, but it was slow and telegraphed. A classic move from someone who thought they could overpower their opponent with brute strength. Alex ducked, narrowly avoiding the punch, and in one smooth motion he grabbed the man's wrist, twisting it behind his back. The biker let out a howl of pain as Alex used his own weight to bring him down, slamming the man to the ground. The second biker, a wiry man with a messy ponytail, rushed forward trying to catch Alex off guard. But Alex was ready. He sidestepped the man's attempted tackle, grabbing him by the collar and pulling him into a spinning move that sent him crashing into a nearby trash can. The biker slammed into it with such force that it toppled over, making a loud clang as it hit the pavement. The man groaned, clearly dazed, struggling to push himself back up. Now it was just the leader and one more biker still standing, but they weren't nearly as confident as they had been a few moments ago. The bikers were starting to realize that they had underestimated Alex, and their pride was quickly turning into fear. They had never been in a situation where they were the ones on the receiving end of a fight like this. They had expected a quick win, but instead they were facing someone who wasn't afraid of them. Someone who wasn't backing down. The leader shot a glare at his remaining ally, a look that communicated everything. If they didn't get control soon, they might lose. The remaining biker, a tall, burly man with tattoos covering his arms, started to circle around Alex, clearly trying to figure out how to approach him. The leader stepped forward, his voice low and deadly. "I'm not playing games anymore, kid. This is your last chance. You give up now and maybe we'll let you go." Alex could hear the threat in the leader's words, but he didn't flinch. He wasn't going to give in to intimidation. Not when they had already shown what they were willing to do. He wasn't going to just let them walk away after everything that had happened. "You think you can intimidate me?" Alex said, his voice steady but filled with a defiant edge. "You can't, not anymore." The leader gritted his teeth, his eyes narrowing. "Then let's finish it, kid." With that, both the leader and the remaining biker lunged at Alex at the same time, but this time Alex was ready. He didn't try to block or dodge, they were moving too fast for that. Instead, he anticipated their moves, using the environment around him to his advantage. The street was littered with debris, fallen branches, trash cans, and even a few loose stones, and Alex used these obstacles to break their momentum. The leader came in first, throwing a wild punch that aimed for Alex's head, but Alex saw it coming and dropped low, his body moving like water, fluid and quick. He shifted his weight, moving under the leader's outstretched arm, and used the man's own movement against him. Alex grabbed his wrist, twisting it and using the leader's momentum to send him tumbling to the ground with a thud. Before the leader could recover, the second biker charged, aiming to tackle Alex to the ground. But Alex had already moved to the side, stepping just out of the man's reach. The biker, off balance and still charging forward, crashed into a nearby pile of garbage bags with a loud crash. The force of the impact sent trash flying everywhere, and the biker groaned in pain as he tried to push himself up. In that moment, the bikers realized they were losing. They hadn't expected this fight to be anything more than a few minutes of intimidation, but Alex was proving them wrong. He wasn't just some kid they could bully. He had made them work for every inch they tried to take from him, and they weren't sure how much more they could handle. The leader, still on the ground, wiped blood from his lip, his face twisted with rage. He tried to get up, but he was slower now, his pride bruised and his body aching. Alex, standing tall and breathing heavily, watched him carefully. The leader could barely make eye contact now, and his movements were sluggish. The bikers were realizing they had made a huge mistake. The momentum had completely shifted in Alex's favor. Alex's heart was still pounding in his chest, but his mind was clear. He wasn't done yet, but he knew this wasn't going to last much longer. The bikers were losing steam, and they were starting to realize they were no match for a determined teen who wasn't afraid to fight back. The balance of power had shifted and Alex had taken control. He didn't need to prove anything more. The bikers had gotten the message. They were no longer the ones calling the shots. Alex took a step back, his breathing steady and his eyes locked onto the leader. He didn't need to say anything. The message was clear. They were beaten and they were going to walk away. The leader, bloodied and bruised, looked up at Alex for a long moment. For the first time in the entire confrontation, there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes. Alex had won. The air was thick with tension as Alex stood there, his chest heaving, his body aching from the quick but intense fight. His mind, however, was clear. The bikers, once so sure of their dominance, were now visibly shaken. The leader, bloodied and bruised, was struggling to push himself up from the ground, his eyes flicking between Alex and his fallen comrades. The tall, burly biker who had attempted to tackle him was groaning, still stuck in the trash heap. The other bikers were barely able to sit up, and the man Alex had knocked out earlier was still lying unconscious on the pavement. For a moment, it felt like time had slowed down. The street, once full of threatening noise and chaos, had fallen eerily silent, save for the sounds of Alex's heavy breathing and the occasional groan of the bikers. The sun was now lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the pavement, but Alex didn't take his eyes off the leader. His instincts told him not to drop his guard just yet, even though it seemed the bikers were starting to realize that they had pushed their luck too far. The leader, looking battered and humiliated, wiped his bloodied lip and finally managed to stand up, albeit unsteadily. His face was still twisted in anger, but there was a noticeable shift in his expression. Gone was the cocky, overconfident demeanor he had arrived with. Instead, there was a palpable mix of disbelief and grudging respect. He looked at Alex, eyes narrowing, not with the fury of someone who still thought they could win, but with a deep, frustrated recognition that the tables had turned. "You," the leader started, his voice strained, still thick with the remnants of anger. "You're not like the others." Alex didn't respond, but he knew exactly what the leader meant. The bikers had expected an easy victory, a teen who would cower or be too afraid to fight back. Instead, they had been met with someone who not only stood his ground but fought with the skill and determination of someone far older and more experienced. It was a humbling experience for them, and the realization that they had underestimated Alex hit them harder than any punch. The leader stumbled toward his fallen comrades, muttering under his breath. "This isn't how it was supposed to go." Alex watched him carefully, his eyes never leaving the bikers as they slowly began to rise, each of them looking more embarrassed than the last. They hadn't expected to lose, and certainly not to a kid. For them, this wasn't just about a bike or a quick confrontation. This was about pride. They were known for their toughness, their ability to intimidate anyone who crossed their path. But Alex had shattered that illusion in an instant. The remaining biker, the one who had been circling Alex earlier, finally staggered to his feet. He looked around at his friends and then at Alex, his face etched with frustration. His lips twitched as though he wanted to say something, but the words never came. Instead, he simply shook his head, disbelief still etched into his features. He was clearly considering whether it was worth going for another round or just cutting their losses and retreating. The silence stretched on, and Alex didn't budge. He wasn't about to get cocky, but he wasn't going to let them think they could bully him into submission. His mind kept running through the possibility that they might try to attack again, but each moment that passed without them charging was a victory in itself. They were losing confidence, and that was exactly what Alex needed. Finally, the leader spoke again, his voice quieter now, more resigned. "We're done here, kid. You win." There was a long pause as those words hung in the air. For a split second, Alex couldn't believe what he was hearing. The bikers, the ones who had threatened him, the ones who had come at him like wolves, were admitting defeat. It felt like a moment of strange, almost surreal victory. The leader, clearly torn between his anger and the undeniable reality of the situation, glanced at his men. "Let's get out of here," he said, his voice gruff but devoid of its earlier venom, "before we make even bigger fools of ourselves." The bikers, clearly beaten and bruised both physically and mentally, nodded in reluctant agreement. They started to shuffle toward their motorcycles, moving slowly, their heads down, clearly trying to preserve what little dignity they had left. Alex didn't move an inch. He stood there, his stance steady but his heart still racing. He had done it. He had stood up to them, and now they were leaving, retreating with their tails between their legs. As the leader climbed onto his bike, he turned back to look at Alex one last time, his eyes filled with a mix of respect and begrudging admiration. You got guts, kid. I'll give you that. But don't think you're invincible. Life doesn't work like that. There's always someone bigger, tougher. His voice was almost a warning, but it lacked the force it had had earlier. Alex didn't respond, but there was no need. His actions had already spoken louder than any words could. The leader gunned his engine, and one by one the bikers followed suit, their motorcycles roaring to life as they slowly pulled out of the neighborhood, leaving Alex standing in the street, watching them go. As the sound of their engines faded into the distance, a sense of quiet satisfaction settled over Alex. He had done it. He had stood up for himself and had proven that he wasn't someone to be pushed around. The bikers had left, but the impact of what had just happened would stay with him forever. He had won more than just a fight that day. He had gained confidence, and he had proven to himself that he was capable of standing up against even the toughest challenges. The adrenaline was starting to wear off, and Alex's body began to feel the weight of the fight. His muscles were sore, his breathing still a bit shallow, but there was a small, quiet victory in the way he held himself. He had faced down a group of bikers and had come out on top. He hadn't backed down, and he hadn't given up. As he walked home, the sun finally dipping below the horizon, Alex couldn't help but smile a little. It wasn't just about the physical fight anymore. It was about the realization that he was stronger than he had ever given himself credit for. And for the first time in a long while, Alex truly felt in control of his own destiny. As the roar of the bikers' engines faded into the distance, the quiet of the neighborhood settled back into place, but it felt different now. For the first time, Alex felt a profound sense of calm, mixed with the adrenaline that still pulsed through his veins. The street that had once seemed so ordinary now felt charged with a new energy. His energy. He wasn't just some random teenager who had walked into a bad situation. He had faced down a group of intimidating bikers, and he had walked away not just unscathed but victorious. For a few moments, Alex stood still in the middle of the street, absorbing everything that had just happened. His heart rate was slowly returning to normal, and the tightness in his muscles was beginning to ease. But the mental impact of what he had just accomplished was something he wasn't going to shake off anytime soon. The fight had been quick, intense, and more physical than anything he had experienced in his life. But it had also been a test of his character, his determination, and his courage. He had stood up for himself, fought back when it mattered most, and not only had he survived, but he had won. And in that moment, Alex realized that he wasn't just proud of what he had done physically. He was proud of the way he had kept his cool, the way he hadn't let fear control him, the way he had made choices in the heat of the moment that ensured his survival. Turning to face his bike, which was still standing where he had left it, Alex couldn't help but give a small, tired smile. It wasn't about the bike anymore. It was about what it represented, the symbol of his independence, the symbol of his refusal to let anyone take what was his without a fight. As he walked toward it, he heard the distant sound of voices approaching from the direction of the convenience store. His pulse quickened momentarily, but this time it wasn't out of fear. It was out of curiosity. Had someone seen what had happened? Had the bikers caused enough of a scene for people to notice? Alex wasn't sure, but he felt a strange sense of pride, almost as if he were ready to share his story, even if it meant facing the aftermath of the confrontation. But as the voices grew closer, Alex saw that it wasn't anyone from the neighborhood. A small group of his friends, who lived a few streets over, came into view, walking toward him. They didn't seem to notice him at first, too busy talking and laughing among themselves, but then one of them, Kyle, spotted him standing by his bike. "Yo, Alex. What happened, man? You good?" Kyle called out as he jogged over, his face full of concern. He was followed by two more of their friends, Olivia and Jordan, both of whom looked equally curious. Alex hesitated for a split second, unsure how to respond. He wasn't exactly in the mood for explaining the entire scene with the bikers. It was still too fresh, too raw, but there was something about his friends' expressions that made him want to share, to tell them about what had just happened, even if it sounded too wild to believe. "Yeah, I'm fine," Alex said, trying to sound casual, but his voice betrayed him, a bit of shakiness still lingering. "Just had a little run-in with some bikers." Kyle's eyes widened and he stopped in his tracks. "Wait, what? Bikers? Like actual bikers?" His tone was a mixture of disbelief and shock. "Yeah. Alex replied with a shrug, trying to downplay the seriousness of it. They tried to take my bike. Things got a little intense. Olivia and Jordan exchanged a glance, their eyes filled with surprise, but they didn't question him. They all knew Alex wasn't the type to make up wild stories. They had seen him handle his fair share of rough situations before, but this was something else. Did you fight them? Jordan asked, his voice laced with incredulity. Alex nodded, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. I kind of had to. They didn't leave me much choice. Kyle raised an eyebrow. Dude, you seriously took on a whole group of bikers? Alex didn't answer right away, but his mind flashed back to the moment when the leader of the group had realized that he was in over his head. Alex had felt a rush of empowerment when he had managed to outmaneuver them, but even now he didn't know exactly how he had done it. It had been instinct, training, and the sheer will to not let them push him around. He wasn't just defending his bike. He was defending himself, his independence, and his pride. It wasn't just about the bike, Alex finally said, his voice quieter now. It was about standing up for myself. I couldn't just let them take it. I had to show them I wasn't scared. The group fell silent for a moment, and Alex could see the respect in their eyes. They knew what it took to stand up to someone, to fight back when everything seemed stacked against you, but none of them had ever been in a situation like that. To them, Alex wasn't just their friend anymore. He had become something else, someone who had faced down real danger and come out on top. Kyle broke the silence with a low whistle. Man, I don't know how you did it, but that's crazy. You're a legend now, Alex. Alex rolled his eyes, trying to deflect the attention. It wasn't anything like that. It's just what I had to do, but I'm glad I didn't let them win. The words settled over him like a heavy blanket, and for the first time, Alex realized that he wasn't just talking about that moment with the bikers. He was talking about the bigger picture. He wasn't just someone who had been pushed around before, someone who let the world decide his fate. He had taken control. He had fought for his own space, for his own sense of autonomy, and it had worked. The group continued to talk, their conversation drifting from the incident to lighter topics, but Alex remained in his own thoughts. He wasn't thinking about how the bikers had backed down or how they had left him alone. He was thinking about how he felt. For the first time in a long time, he felt strong. Strong not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. He had faced something he never expected and had walked away with more than just a story to tell. As he mounted his bike, ready to head home, Alex realized that his life had subtly shifted. The event with the bikers had forced him to confront fears he didn't even know he had. And in doing so, he had grown. In a way, he felt more prepared for whatever might come next. The world wasn't always kind, but he now knew that he had the strength to face it head on. With one last glance at his friends, who were now laughing and joking around, Alex couldn't help but smile to himself. Life would always have its challenges, but from now on, he knew he was ready for whatever came his way. And the bikers? They had learned the hard way that Alex wasn't someone to mess with. But more importantly, Alex had learned the most valuable lesson of all. He wasn't just surviving. He was thriving,